Hi everybody, welcome to Norland Unwrapped. Just going to wait for everybody to log on. Hopefully you've all got your access codes, etc. So just bear with us, we'll just wait a few seconds. Oh good, numbers are going up, that's always a good sign. It means the technical aspect's working, fingers crossed. Brilliant. It's a lovely evening, so thank you very much for joining us this evening. Okay, give it a few seconds and then we'll make a very quick start because we've got lots to get through tonight.
We really have. Fun stuff. It's okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right, I think we will very quickly make a start. So hello, welcome everybody to Norland Unwrapped. You know me by now, my name's Kate. Lovely to see you virtually, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'm going to very quickly whiz through some housekeeping as I always do. It's obviously the session is recorded. We can't hear you, we can't see you, so please don't worry about that. And the recording will be available afterwards. So if you do need to scoot off or you can't make it, then please you'll be able to access it via the website and we'll send you the link. So this is our very first taster session, our interactive taster session. It's our 6th session of Unwrapped. All the other Unwrapped sessions are available on our website, so please do have a look at that. As it's the first interactive session, we want you to be as interactive as possible. So Lucy and Marie and Lucy are here today, and they'll talk you through that, and we hope you really enjoy the session. You should all have your log-on details for Nearpod, but Lucy will check that in a moment. And just to let you know, we have our next virtual session will be the admissions and accommodation Q&A. The date for that will be confirmed, and that will go out on social media and our website as well. And again, we'll have our international student manager. So if there are international students out there at the moment, you're more than welcome to join us for that session as well. So that's me. It's a very quick introduction. I'm going to hand you over to Lucy, who will make a start on our virtual interactive session. So Lucy, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kate. Hello all, and welcome to this Norland Unwrapped session. So I can see that 17 people have logged into Nearpod, but we've got 33 people in Zoom. So do keep logging on because it will take you to the right slide when you log on anyway. And the way you're going to interact with us is through that additional window. So either you might be accessing it on your phone or in a separate window for your browser. It doesn't really matter as long as you're interacting with us. So before we get started, we're just going to do a few quick introductions. So as we've already said, my name is Lucy. That's going to be a recurring phrase throughout this whole session. And I studied at Norland between 2003 and 2005. And I undertook my probationary year in 2006. And I was a nanny for one child, who you can see in the picture there, that is Pops, in Horsham in West Sussex for 4 years. So it was a wonderful job. I really loved it. And sadly, she had to go to school at some point. So then I left to work at the Norland nursery. And that was between 2009 and 2013. Now, this was a free flow nursery that followed a Reggio approach, which is something we're going to talk a little bit about later. And it's where I got my values in childcare, and that's respecting children as individuals, being culturally appropriate and responsive, and all of those kind of things. And I returned to Norland to lecture in 2013. Now, I'm a senior lecturer and a student engagement manager. Those are two very different roles, but today I'm here in my senior lecturer capacity. So I'm going to move on and we're going to introduce our lovely students who are all in set 45. So Marie.
Hi, I'm Marie. I'm an international student at Norland from Germany. I come from a really big family with 3 sisters and many animals at home. I finished school in Germany. I did complete my A-levels in 2017. I then moved on to live in the US for a year to be an au pair for 2 lovely children. When I came back home, I worked at a health resort nursery for 6 months, which gave me amazing experience in working with children with need. And then I started to become a secondary school teacher in biology and English, but I realized I wanted to work with the little ones. So I started to study at Norland in September.
Thank you very much. Lucy.
Hi, I'm also Lucy. I grew up on a farm in the north of England in Yorkshire, and I did sort of very different A-levels, maths, chemistry and biology. But I also realised that I wanted to work with children. So I took a year out to work as an au pair like Marie in Paris. and now I am head of Set 45, which is first year, so that's me.
Thank you very much. And Lucy.
Hiya, I'm the last Lucy, and I grew up in Zimbabwe, where I was educated with my 3 sisters. My A-levels were classical studies, literature and sociology. I did participate a lot at school, and our clubs worked a lot with younger children, which I think started my passion from there. And I moved to London quite recently in 2020, where I worked as an au pair, and this confirmed my love for children. And I worked from there before starting at Norland in September.
Fabulous. Thank you very much all. So we're now going to begin our interactive session, which is on culture, communication and creativity for belonging. So this is something that we explore a lot at Norland. I head of widening participation as well. So we like to talk about respecting children as individuals and looking at their cultural backgrounds. So that's what we're going to be exploring today. So what I would like to consider is what connects us to others. So if we're looking to connect with people, we'll try and communicate with them. That's something that we do. As a culture here in Britain, we tend to go abroad and shout quite loudly to try and make ourselves understood. But there are other ways that we can do that. So how do we communicate? So I'd like you to think about types of verbal communication, non-verbal communication, and how this looks for different people. So I'm going to switch to the collaborate board, but I'm going to ask the students as well what they think different types of communication look like.
So I work with a non-verbal child in my last placement, and we used a lot of visual aids. So he had a book with signs, and he used these signs to communicate.
On my last placement, I worked with a baby who couldn't yet speak, and that was just a lot of crying and stopping the crying, and also sort of hand gestures like reaching for things or pushing things away. That's another form of communication.
We did one similar, but it was for a whole class in a setting, and it's also to help the children kind of transition into the day. We had like little pictures of what we were going to do, and this is so that they could read like what was happening, and it was that, I guess, like in a form of non-verbal communication, is just helping them know as well to transition through the day.
Fabulous. Thank you very much all. We've also got some great suggestions here on the collaborate board. So Amy, there's sign language, which actually we're going to be doing a little bit of later through the use of Makaton. Body language, such as eye contact. And this is a really interesting one because this is something we sort of lost when everything went online, isn't it, in COVID-19. So when we were in lockdown and we're doing everything via Zoom or Microsoft Teams, eye contact was a really tricky thing to demonstrate. And actually, it's really interesting in terms of body language now. The number of times I'm speaking to someone face to face and I still wave at them as though they're really far away. And that's something that's come up when doing things online. Mary says picture cards, absolutely. So for children, especially with special educational needs or disabilities who are non-verbal, picture cards can be really useful for pointing, so absolutely. Facial expressions, definitely. And some people have got very stern facial expressions by default. As you can see on my face, I have a permanent frown line. That's through deep thought, not through generally being very angry. But facial expressions are something that obviously conveys whether we like what another person is doing or we don't like it. And children will tell us that in no uncertain terms with their faces, will they? So Madeline also says music, and that's both performing music, definitely, and listening to music. So if you hear somebody listening to a particular type of music, perhaps it's a sad song, you might think that they're not feeling very happy today. Ava Ray says through our emotions, such as body language, smiling and that kind of thing. Absolutely. And Eva Rose has rightly said Makaton. And interactional signals. Yes, so things that mean that we want to get somebody's attention, for example. So if we're thinking about if you want to talk to somebody, so today there was a big group of us in the staff room and I wanted to speak to someone. So I went and stood nearby them, waited for them to stop talking and then gave an indication that I wanted to speak. And these are all different ways that we communicate and are really valuable for making our thoughts understood to others. Thank you very much for your input there, guys. So we're going to move on to the next slide. So Tomasello talks about why we communicate. So he says that we do it to ask. So when we ask questions, we want to find out about something. It might be that we're asking questions about a particular person. How are you? Where are you from? That kind of thing. It's to inform, to answer those questions, and to share. So sharing is a really interesting one, and it's quite abstract really, especially for small children. So when we're sharing something that a child, if a child is sharing something that you haven't shared with them, it can be difficult for them to communicate that experience. So for example, they've gone on a trip to the park where you didn't join them. For them, because they're egocentric, it can be hard for them to explain what happened as though you weren't there. So they don't provide a sufficient amount of contextual information. So when we bear this in mind, when we're interacting with people, it becomes easier to communicate with them. And Vygotsky talked about something called cultural tools. So this is Lev Vygotsky. As you can see, he's pretty young. He died quite young, in his 30s. And he said that every child we meet has a previous history, and knowing this and respecting it, we can foster a sense of belonging. And it's a really interesting concept when you think about it, because how many times do we treat children who are coming into, say, an education setting, for example, and we go, okay, so they are 4 and they should be able to do this. They are 5 and they should be able to do this, instead of looking at what they've actually experienced. If you think about children who have come from maybe a care background, for example, their experiences are going to be very different from someone who's come from like a big family, those who've come from perhaps somewhere like Ukraine. These are all different experiences that we bring to our current experiences. So he theorized something called cultural tools, which are objects, phrases, or actions that are familiar to children. As such, they can be a physical tool, or they can be psychological. And I'm going to explain that in more detail on the next slide. Cultural tools are things that connect us to other people by means of cultural familiarity. A good example for Norland is the Norland hat. The hat at Norland indicates that we are part of something. So that is a physical cultural tool. So physical cultural tools are objects that I could show to you and you would understand the purpose, while someone else might not. So those people who haven't heard of Norland might try and hazard a guess at what it means. When I was a student at Norland, I remember somebody asking me if I worked at Next, which was an interesting question. However, what they were trying to draw on is that cultural experience. So an example that Vygotsky gives is a musical instrument, because instruments differ from culture to culture, or maybe an eating utensil. So if you think, say, a fork compared with chopsticks. However, we also have psychological cultural tools, and these are intangible things like language, social orders, and expectations that you can't necessarily see, but that can connect you with others. So that can be things like accents. If you hear an accent that sounds like yours, you might then go up to that person and say, that sounds like a familiar accent, you know, where are you from? And try and start up a conversation. And that's how we connect with others. So all physical tools have got psychological accompaniments, and that's because essentially tools have a use, and the use is the psychological cultural tool, but psychological ones can exist by themselves. And an example of this is, what do you call this object? And I would like you to type that in here as fast as you can. So what do you call this? Guys, what do you call that particular object?
I call it a remote or control, but not together usually.
Sure.
I mean, I can chime in from the German perspective. I would just say Fernbedienung, which is the German word for remote.
Lovely.
Dewberry.
The Dewberry. Fair enough.
I'm team remote control.
Your team remote control. Fair enough. Some people call it the buttons. Some people call it the zapper. There are all of these kind of different words that we have for this particular object. If you said remote control, that's the actual name of it, isn't it? So it's a slightly different thing. Whereas with homes and things like zapper, buttons, Dewberry, that kind of thing, we might not necessarily understand what that means. So Michele says a telecommando. Amy says remote, or the what's it. My nan calls it the, the thing. Remote control, remote, TV remote. So we are traditionalists in this group, I think, here. Yeah, TV remote, the buttons. The pipper, that's a new one, Becky. I haven't heard that one before. So you're starting to see a little bit about cultural tools that exist on a very, very small scale. So earlier, I talked a little bit about, we're going to go back to the student view, apologies. I would like you to tell me from my accent, where do you think I am from? This is a psychological cultural tool. So you can type or write directly onto this screen. if you would like to. I am not going to ask the students because they know. All right. So if you just draw directly onto the slide, it should be able to see. Just give it a little while. Have you guys ever had someone mistake where you're from?
I was asked in my last placement if I'm from Canada.
Interesting. Okay.
I saw it as a compliment because it apparently doesn't seem like you can hear my German that much anymore.
Sure.
I get a lot of South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I've been New Zealand, Australian, and I'm trying to think of them. I think I also got a Canada once. So a fun mixture.
Fabulous.
All my housemates' parents just asked me where in the north I was from, so I think they could just tell. They could just hear the northern accent coming through.
Sure. Okay, so Amy has guessed the south of England. You're correct. It is the south of England. I wonder whereabouts though. Well, I don't wonder. I know because I know where I'm from. So we will see. Let me have a look. Have a scroll down, see what other people have. Someone's guessing West Sussex. You are absolutely. West Sussex is where I nannied, so it's a fair guess. South of England, south of England. It is the south of England. I'll give you that. Eleanor says London. Sophie says Somerset. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. Oxfordshire. What's that one? London. Okay, so an interesting and fun fact is that my mum made me have something called elocution lessons before I came to Norland. So I don't have my original accent. But if I were to speak in my original accent, which is this one, you might be able to pick up that I am indeed from the West Country. I am not quite from Somerset, but I am from Wiltshire. All right, so my mum, in worrying about me coming to Norland and belonging with the group of people that I'd be with, decided that I didn't need my accent anymore. So what that meant was I had to go through lots and lots of lessons of how to get rid of that accent. So I was talking to my friend Katie about this earlier on, that in getting rid of an accent, essentially it puts your tongue in a different place. So in a West Country accent, your tongue's further back in your mouth. And I've moved it forwards to essentially get rid of it. What was really interesting is the majority of my set had West Country accents when I arrived. So because of my mum's fear of essentially not having the right cultural tools, psychological cultural tools, she decided that I needed to have these lessons. However, it turned out that actually in sticking with my original cultural tools, that sense of belonging probably would have been fostered a little bit more. And this is essentially what we're talking about with cultural tools, is how you foster that sense of belonging. So cultural tools can represent an environment as small as a child's home or as large as an entire country. So in terms of the remote control, different homes call that different things. However, if we're talking about an entire country at the moment, we've got the Jubilee, which is uniting us culturally. That's the variation of scale that we have in cultural tools. They can be words that unite a generation, or an accent that represents a region, like the West Country, for example. And sometimes they can become obsolete as a shared understanding changes. So if you think about things like the save icon on a computer, that is a cultural tool because it represents the concept of saving something. However, I am willing to bet that quite a lot of you have never used a floppy disk to save something. I had to when I was at college, and there's a reason we've moved on from that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you now to do a matching activity. And to do this, if you want to get rid of the instructions, you press the up arrow. And what I would like to do is match the sayings to the meanings. So they're from different regions in the United Kingdom. And I wonder if you can guess what they mean. And I'm going to ask you guys, well, everybody's doing that, what kind of sayings you have from where you're from that people might not necessarily understand.
None of my flatmates got a poke. It's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. which means like it's better than nothing. And I said it the other day and they said, what on earth are you talking about?
Interesting.
I had like a few words. So we used robots as means traffic lights for us. And Zessa is electricity. And then which will come up with Brai is actually, I'm pretty sure it's Afrikaans, but we use it back home for barbecue. And then this one I actually had to use today and I just couldn't think of it. It was granadilla. I don't know, is passion fruit.
Ah, okay. Interesting. And you use that with your housemates, and now they're getting the lingo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
slowly roping them into understanding.
So I was writing a meal plan for my next placement today, and I wrote for breakfast a bagel with cream cheese, salmon, and arugula. And one of my roommates was like, "What's arugula?" Like, it's the bitter salad, and I now know this is called rocket here, apparently. But she had no idea what arugula was, and I had no idea what rocket was. So,
I mean, that's fair. They're very different words. You wouldn't think they were the same thing. But I guess it's like aubergine, eggplant, you know, that kind of English versus American, that kind of thing. And some of the sayings that we've got here, so I can see that people are responding, and we're getting 7 for 7. And we're going to view the pairs now. Okay, so as you can see, there are these different sayings. So Adinacan is Scottish, but I don't know. Archie is, look at him, it's West Country or Bristolian particularly. Summit's up here, something's wrong, and that's Cornwall. These are all donated by members of staff. So we've got a Cornish lecturer, and also the Scottish ones come from my husband, who's from Aberdeen. Clarty, again Scottish, a dirty. Cwtch is cuddle, that's Welsh. Scrage is a light graze or cut, and Gurtlush is really nice. So Gurtlush is a contentious one because Bristol thinks it's from there, Wales thinks it's from there. I'm not going to get into that debate. All right. So, okay. But the key points of cultural tools and anything like that is the idea that we want to create respect for belonging. So if we consider the individuality of the child and their family, we're going to help them to belong. And this can be any familiar objects that they might have at home. You can also have in a setting. And if you're trying to get to know a child, it might be that you want to meet them at their own interests or take something that's familiar to them. So if you think about children's books, for example, that are really familiar, like the Gruffalo, the Tiger Who Came to Tea, they're likely to have that at home. They're coming into a setting and the key person who they're newly introduced to reads that to them. They're going to get that sense of belonging and start to build that trust. If we ask questions and get to know children and their previous history, we can use this as a starting point for inclusive practice. So it can be tempting to think of culture in settings as celebrating a particular festival, for example, and thinking about, say, a religion or a culture in general terms. But actually, if you think about the different ways that, say, people who celebrate Christmas, traditions in one house differ to the next, to the next, to the next house. So we need to think about that when we're respecting cultural differences. And we want to encourage conversations and celebrate cultural difference and explain the similarities. So when we're talking about this, we're using respectful phrases and we're working to get children to ask the right questions and trying to understand each other. Okay, so that's respectful belonging. And this kind of leads us on to how we communicate with the non-verbal. So earlier on, we mentioned signing as part of their Collaborate board. So strong call for that one. And if we're talking about things like accents and those verbal cultural cues, those who are non-verbal cannot respond in the same way to those. So there'll be some words and things that if somebody is speaking to a non-verbal person, they might be able to respond to, but if a child is deaf or a person is deaf, they're not going to be able to respond in the same way. So there are many ways to communicate with children who have additional needs, and we talked about picture cards and that kind of thing. And today we're going to do some Makaton. Makaton is slightly different to things like BSL, which is a little bit more involved. But like all languages, signing is regional and can differ depending on where you are and who you are talking to. So, for example, in America, they tend to try and sign one-handed. There are exceptions to that rule, whereas in BSL, it's more complicated because we use both, and you have a dominant hand. So I'm right-handed, so I'll be using my right hand to do most of the work. And things change over time as well. So for example, telephone used to be signed like this, and then it was signed like this, and now it is signed like this. Okay, so it's very visual, and there are things that you can essentially guess, if you like, with signing within reason. You don't want to upset someone by getting that sign completely wrong. Okay, so how do we use it? You can use it as a whole sentence or function. So I could just say Lucy, because that's my name. I'm Lucy. All right. When we use Makaton, we should be speaking simultaneously because it's about lip reading as much as it is about signing. You can just do the keywords in the sentence. So my name is Lucy, or you could do every word in the sentence. So in Makaton, we don't necessarily have these connective words such as is, so you can spell those out. So my name is Lucy. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of that now. I'm going to get you to do some signing at home. That sounded oddly like children's TV. So here you can see the alphabet. The vowels are highlighted in blue. It's quite tiny actually, so hopefully you can see it a bit more clearly on your own device and you might be able to zoom in. But I will briefly go through the alphabet for you. So we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, got lost there, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Okay, so if I was going to sign my own name, as I've done several times, and Lucy's are an advantage in this particular situation, you would say, my name is Lucy. If I was going to sign my whole name, say, my name is Lucy Krebs. Getting all complicated now. When I did my Makaton course, I with a different surname. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. All right, so if you guys, so Lucy and Marie, if you want to sign your names, that would be fabulous. And Kate, if you want to get involved as well. So my name is, and that's on your name.
I hope you're not grading us on this.
I'm not grading you. No, I kid. No, I'm not grading anyone.
I think a bit more practice, I think.
Okay, so Marie, it'd be M-A-R-I-E. You got a lot of vowels actually. M-A-R-I-E.
Can you repeat the R, please, Lucy? Ah, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that's Makaton in very basic terms. I realize we're flying through this, guys, but the more you practice, the better you get. And when I was a nanny, I used Makaton to help alleviate frustration at meal times before Pops was verbal. So Pops is a pseudonym, that's not her real name. And when she was very small, when she was sat in her high chair, she absolutely hated it. And so it was because she couldn't communicate her preferences. So I taught her some basic signs, really important ones. So fish, for example, and cake, and biscuit, all of it. Oh, I disappeared with that one. So it did mean I was having a lot of arguments in sign. So I'd be trying to feed her fish and she'd be like, no, cake. And I'd be like, no, it's time for fish. She'd go, no, cake. And I said, no, come on, you need to have your fish first. And she'd go, no, cake, please. And I was like, no, it's not because you haven't said please, it's because you're not having cake. That's what's happening. So signing is really helpful for alleviating that frustration. And if you think about what Thomas Sello was saying about communication, that to ask, to share, and to inform, that's what is giving the children the power to do. Okay, so We've already done that, so I'm going to do it again. So my name is Lucy. Okay, so hopefully you at home were able to do that too, who are joining us not on camera. But basic science are really easy to learn, and there are lots of videos on YouTube if you're interested to learn a little bit more. Also at Norland, we've got a separate Makaton course that you can do in addition to your training. So it's a fun thing to do, and it's so valuable. I use this as well with a parent who was profoundly deaf when I was working at the nursery, and it meant that he could be part of his children's parents' evening instead of having to rely on his wife to translate everything, which was really lovely too. So as I said earlier with the telephone and things like that, signs can be very intuitive. So I'm interested to know what you guys think the sign for dance is. Can you sign it? To be fair, you could do anything, can you? So it is that, but you know, you could do the time warp. You can do whatever you want. You could do whatever dance is. So what do you reckon scissors is? Yep, that is scissors. So absolutely. Pen. Yep, as you would expect. Cup of tea. Yeah, don't forget the saucer. Very important. Okay. And baby. Yeah, absolutely. So signs can be really intuitive. Some of them are just amazing because when you find out what they are, they really, you know, they describe what it is. So things like confused. This is confused, which I think really does sum it up. And also I forgot, which is like taking the thought and just throwing it away. I use that one a lot because I forget a lot. Okay, so that is signing. So this takes us up to the break. So feel free to go away and get a little beverage. And in the meantime, I'm going to play you the lovely Emily talking about her experience at Norland.
My name is Emily, I am 21, I am currently studying in my third year at Norland. I'm originally from Falkirk, Scotland, and when I'm not studying I live at home with my mum and two brothers who are aged 9 and 23. So I originally wanted to come to university because growing up I was diagnosed with dyspraxia at 4, dyslexia at 8 and dyscalculia at 12, which meant I often struggled throughout school and studying at a degree level wasn't always something that was seen as capable for me. I originally failed 3 of my mock exams and got a B and was advised against sitting my final exams. So I did sit my final exams and I got 3 Bs and a C with the help of tutors and teachers. I then applied to come to Norland in the year of 2017, but because Scottish qualifications are slightly different, I didn't get in. I need 2 advanced higher and a higher, so I went to college and done my HNC, which is the equivalent to level 3 here in childhood studies, and I then applied to get into Norland again a year later. I had my interview in March and received my conditional offer a week after that. I started volunteering for a local charity supporting children with disabilities and additional support needs when I was 16. I was then promoted to the role of sessional support worker a year later and continued to work there for a year, working with children on a one-to-one basis more frequently while I done my HNC in childhood studies. I then, before I came to Norland, worked in a summer camp, an underprivileged summer camp in America, working with girls from 8 to 12. I loved it so much I worked overtime in my first year so I could go back, and then I was supposed to be returning last summer in a supervisor role, so as a village leader. I knew I wanted to go to university, but because I didn't feel like primary teaching was for me, I didn't quite know the avenue I wanted to go down, and Norland opens the door to wherever you want to work in childcare. So Norland has supported me because they've got to know me and how I learn on a very personal level, and you can always talk to Norland. I've never felt anxious when I've come to a lecture for any question, whether it be about my academic studies, working, or personal stuff. And this really was proven to me during lockdown when I had lecturers reach out to me when I didn't feel like myself and when I didn't see myself, and the fact that they could tell that just shows how special Norland is and how much people get to know you. So the financial aspect in terms of Norland was a massive personal hurdle in terms of how I was going to study here. I still remember exactly where I was when I got my offer and was awarded that bursary. But in order to find the money for my starting fees and uniform, my amazing family, friends and community all came together and raised the money in order to fund my uniform, which makes me very proud to wear it and very proud of the community that I get to call home. I then work part-time throughout my studies and have done since first year. So I worked as a retail assistant within my first year, and then from second year onward I worked for a local charity in Bath that supports children with disabilities. It's definitely great value for money. Norland support are always there, and as I said, I'm not someone who originally thought I would be capable of studying a degree, so the fact that I'm currently in my final year writing a dissertation is amazing. And in terms of after Norland, it's lifelong support, so it doesn't matter if I go away and stop nannying, I can always come back to Norland, and no matter what job I go into in childcare, I know Norland are going to be there to support me through it. This is my photo. This is my mum and my two brothers and me on the night of my fundraiser that my family, friends and community helped me to get into Norland, and I brought it with me today because it's something that is actually my screensaver on my phone, and it's whenever I think about Norland and how I've got here, they're who helped me get here. For anyone who's worried about the financial aspect, I would just say continue to be yourself, and even though juggling, working part-time and doing a degree with 3 learning difficulties has been hard, it has been possible, and it's been possible because of the support from Norland and how much they've gotten to know me. And there's always a way to do it, so just take your time, be you, be proud of who you are, because if you're at Norland, everybody wants you to be here, and if you come to Norland with a passion and show Norland that you want to be here, they'll work with you to make that happen. So it's really special. You know everyone in your year and everybody knows you. I'm currently known as Scottish Emily and I've lived with 2 other Northern students since first year, and I have a very close relationship with them, and I do know the friends that I've made here are going to stay my friends for a very long time. I don't think anyone can quite get into words exactly what Norland means to you, because it's such an amazing thing to be a part of, and I'm in my final year and sometimes it still blows me away that I'm a part of it, but it's something that I'm very proud of, and it's something that I'm going to continue to be proud of for a very long time.
Okay, so just wait, there she is. Okay, fabulous. So that was Emily talking about her belonging at Norland. And yeah, that's it really. That I don't think need to say anything else. She said it all. So we're going to carry on with the session. I've noticed that Daisy in the chat there, you said that you couldn't type into Nearpod. Feel free to contribute via the chat if that's what you would like to do. That's absolutely fine. I can see when people are responding, so please feel free. Okay. And also hello to Aditfa. So as we go on, we're going to talk now about the 100 languages of children. So we've been talking about different languages, different accents, the things that help us belong as part of a community. And I mentioned also that Norland Nursery follows something called the Reggio approach. And it's called Reggio Emilia. And that was devised by someone called Loris Malaguzzi, who's this smiley man here. And he believed that children have 100 languages to communicate, and wrote a poem in that respect. So what he meant by this was that children could communicate through creativity as well as language. And if you think about the way that children communicate, it doesn't necessarily have to be that they say something. It could be that they don't want to look at you. It could be that they hide. It could be that they use their transitional objects, such as a teddy bear or something, to communicate instead. There are 1,000 ways to communicate, all right, or 100 if Malaguzzi is talking about it. All right, so as I said, he was the founder of the Reggio Emilia approach, which is a pedagogical approach that values community, belonging and creativity. So if you're not familiar with the term pedagogical or pedagogy. What that means is how children learn as opposed to what they learn, which is what a curriculum is. Okay, so if you think about something like the national curriculum, that has a set of learning outcomes that children have to reach by a certain stage, whereas a pedagogy is about finding the best ways that children learn. So, for example, a lot of early years practitioners are doers, people who like to do something in order to learn it, put it into action, applying theory to practice. And that's something that is really valued in Reggio Emilia. Okay, so I'm going to play you a video now called The 100 Languages of Children. Just give it a second to load, and this is said by children.
The 100 languages! No way the 100 is there. The child is made of 100. The child has 100 languages. 100 hands. 100 thoughts. 100 ways of thinking. Way of speaking. 100's always 100. Ways of listening, of marveling, of loving. 100 joys for singing and understanding. 100 worlds to discover. 100 worlds to invent. The 100 worlds to dream. The child has 100 languages. And 100 more. But there's still 99! The school and the culture separate the head from the body. They tell the child to think without hands, to do without head, to listen and not to speak, to understand without jaw, to love and to marvel only at Easter and at Christmas. They tell the child to discover the world always there. And of the 100, they steal 99.
They tell the child that work and play,
Reality and fantasy, science and imagination, sky and earth, reason and dream,
are things that do not belong together.
and thus they tell the child that the 100 is not there. The child says, "No way, the 100 is there."
Well, even if you don't agree with the message, you've got to agree that that is very cute. So what they're saying there, or what Malaguzzi is saying there, is that in education we can so easily just tell children what we think they need to know. When children are naturally curious, they have a natural willingness to explore the world. And he felt very strongly that they should be given every chance to communicate in any number of ways. And when I worked in the creative room at Norland Nursery, we saw this time and time again. So children using huge pieces of paper to do a tiny image at the bottom, or using leaves and things that they'd found outside. On one occasion, they used ice to create sculptures because the puddles had frozen. And they can be creative in ways that as adults we don't always think about, because we've lost that natural curiosity that most children have. So in a Reggio Emilia environment, children's work and individuality is celebrated through neutrally coloured settings, with colour provided by the children's work. So there's a lot of beige and brown and greens because those are the natural colours, but displays will have neutral backgrounds too, and then the children's work will be the thing that really pops from that. They do a lot of black and white imagery because actually babies can focus better on that. And what you find as well is that children love to draw in black and white because of that high contrast. And light is really valued as promoting communication and creativity, and children are free to pursue play that interests them, with adults in the setting looking out for invitations to play. So when we're talking about an invitation, it's a child literally asking an adult a question that will draw them in. They do things like sustained shared thinking, which is asking open questions, so or I wonder questions, so I wonder what would happen if, those kind of things, to kind of lead children down a pursuit of curiosity. It's a wonderful pedagogy, and we teach a whole variety of them at Norland. And the students are going to tell you about some of the ones that they really value. But while they're doing that, and hopefully in your instructional email, you were asked to bring a torch, I would like you to think about how you would create something using the torch on your phone, or using a lamp that's nearby, or something like that, and then upload it on the next slide. If you didn't bring a torch, using objects around you, create an image. It doesn't have to be super fancy, it doesn't have to be super arty, it can just be something that represents you. Okay, you've got 5 minutes, so that's virtually no time at all to put that together. You can take a picture with your phone and upload it to the artist board. So these guys in the meantime are going to be talking about pedagogies that influence them. So for example, I know that Maria is a big fan of Froebel. And yeah, so stay nearby and then we'll go through the things that you've created. Okay, so I'm going to switch over now. So Maria, would you like to start us off?
Yes. So Froebel is from Germany. So a lot of the nurseries and settings in Germany are very much influenced by him. And he founded or started the idea of kindergartens. And I went to one, and it's very much including play in everything we do, and including play and connecting it with nature and the outdoors. So I went to a kindergarten, a Froebel kindergarten, that allowed us to go outside whenever we wanted and include the outdoors in our play, and just be children and run around together. And was also nice to learn from each other because we weren't separated by age groups, for children to learn from other children. So when I was 3, I was in a group with 6-year-olds and 5-year-olds, to learn from them, and they got to help us learn, which brought them a lot of gave them a lot of valuable lessons. So that was really cool. And Froebel it's very child-led and just enjoying play and enjoying being a child. So that really influenced me, I think, as a person.
So one of the children I was on placement with, she attended a Reggio Emilia inspired nursery like you were talking about, and I found out it was the old Norland nursery that Lucy Krebs worked at, and I just thought it was amazing. I went inside and I looked around, and like she said, everything's so natural and the children's work is what stands out. And also what I quite liked is that there's so much sort of real stuff, like it's not a pretend kitchen. They've got like real cookery books in there and real utensils that the children can use, and I think they really like it.
In my most recent placement, it was, I think, a bit similar to Lucy's, is that they used a lot of real tools. So that we had real swords and knives and forks, and I was with year twos, which is quite old, but they were using actual like nails for their woodworks. They were creating like little cars, and then when we went into the garden, they used wheelbarrows, spades. And I think it was really important that we warriors, like practitioners and parents, it's that it's a bit too risky, but I feel, and what I've witnessed, is that their children are actually gain a better understanding of the tools and how to use them and the safety around it than they would, I think, usually if we give them like a plastic knife and fork. And it's just also that transition into higher education, I think, eases it a lot more for children as well. It is incredible to witness at the same time, and seeing how capable children are, because I think at a lot of times we underestimate children's abilities.
I think that's the whole negotiating risks on their own. It's really cool to actually see, oh, a 3-year-old can negotiate. Can they jump down this log or not? If they get the opportunity and the adult doesn't come running being like, no, don't jump. They have a good understanding of, can they do it or not? Is this safe or not?
Fabulous. Sorry, go on, Lucy.
I think they do it in, I think it's Sweden or Switzerland. I'll get confused between the two. But I think most nurseries and schools, they are very open to risky play, and in terms of like they just have like a forest and children are just allowed to go like run to there, or they can dress themselves and how they feel is fit for the weather, which I think is amazing at the same time as well, regulating themselves.
Great. I'm really sorry I dropped out. I got the blue screen of death on my Surface, so I have no idea what happened in the meantime. Lucy, have you shared yours? You have. Okay, fabulous. So I'm just going to share my screen again. I'm very apologetic for that, guys. It's one of those things. I thought this is going really well. Nothing's gone wrong technically.
Technical gremlins, but it was very smooth, and it was very, we didn't notice a thing at all.
Except for the fact that I have no idea what's going on.
No, we didn't panic. We didn't panic at all. I was there ready to jump in when needed.
Fabulous. Okay, so Eva Rose is straight in there with a picture. Fabulous. Also, that is a great horse. Fabulous. Let's give it a little bit longer. So in the meantime, I'm going to show you some images from a previous lecture where I've done this with students. So Kate, can I just check that you can see that?
Yeah, I can see
fabulous.
that.
Yeah. Okay, so you can see here that someone's used a torch to make it look like a summer day on a blue sky. So this is the power of light, really, and that's what Reggio is talking about in terms of giving children that scope for creativity with any kind of object. So light and shadow, black and white, anything like that. This is done through a glass of water. This is done through the candle and the light creating shadows. And we've also got different objects casting shadows here. So she later drew around all those different shapes to create a more permanent thing. And when children are creating, sometimes it can be quite an overwhelming thing to, put something on paper. It can be quite stressful. This comes from things like being encouraged to mark, make, and doing letter formation only and exclusively. And for some children, creating can be a really overwhelming situation. So if you can create something that is not permanent, such as with ice, as I talked about earlier, or through something like leaves and flowers and giving them the choice of whether they want to immortalize that through mark making, is a really beautiful part of creativity and self-expression. We've got here the light cast through some shapes in a cardboard box. I think it's actually a space rocket, if I'm going to be true to the student's definition. And then the students use different colours from a lamp that she has in her room to create the same image several times. It's a little bit pop arty, which I like, big fan of the genre. And then you've got the red one here casting shapes onto the wall. So let us visit your gallery. Let's go. I feel like we should play some music now, Kate. Get
the old Take Heart music up, I think, don't you?
That's it, yeah. Okay, so from Eva here, we've got a lovely picture of a cat with a guitar. So I'm assuming a musician, which is wonderful. And music is such a valuable thing with children as well. They love playing music. They love making noise, as I'm sure those of you who spent time with children will understand. And you get some beautiful singing as well. And the cat looks well interested. So from Isabel, we have a horse. So I'm assuming that you maybe have a horse. You like horse riding, being outside and that kind of thing. Oh, I'm interested for this. Some really interesting shadows on that one. I'm thinking it might be upside down, but it's creating some great images as a result. So you've got the spiky shapes and the round shapes, a little bit more abstract. Fabulous. Georgina, nice. I like that, a classic. And Grace got some music and some painting. So again, another creative soul, which is fabulous. Oh, what have we got from Sophie there? Don't want to scroll beyond. It's not letting me scroll back up again. So this is an in progress one, it's just told me. So we'll come back to you, Sophie. You can see that more bits are adding on. Ah, a beautiful tree. I too like being outside. I have an allotment. I like growing things. This is another thing that's great to do with children. Fabulous. Okay, so I'll leave that up a little bit longer. And in terms of how we're connecting these ideas together today, we've talked about the previous experiences that we bring to our current experiences. We've talked about language and accents and the different things that connect us to others. And art, as Eva Rose's image really demonstrates, can connect us to others in a multitude of different ways. So drawing people in through creativity, sound, and all of that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm really sorry if you didn't get a chance to put your image in. I'm going to move on to the next slide now, and it means that you won't be able to add any more, but thank you very much for your contributions. I'm going to pass you over to Kate to do her important dates.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I learned lots. Thank you very much. Really, really enjoyed that. That was really, really interesting. I need to start practicing with Makaton and you know, make sure I can get my name right. So thank you for that. Brilliant. We've had a brilliant time. I just want to ask from the students' perspective, we've had a really good session, and I know obviously you've got so much, you know, to go on with and things like that. And I just wanted to ask a very quick question to all of you, really. And that's just kind of general. What have you really enjoyed so far about your first year at Norland? Because I think that's always really the first year, especially if you're a prospective student, I think it's always really good to hear from people who are actually here and doing the course. So obviously we touched on the lectures today, which have been brilliant. But what have you really enjoyed about your first year so far?
So for me, Lucy already said it earlier. I am a person who learns best if I get the chance to what I learn, put it into immediate practice. So being able to do that not only in the many placements we do throughout the year, but also we sometimes do a lecture, and then the lecturer is like, okay, let's go into our Norland nursery and you guys get to play and try what you just learned. Or we did a whole sensory lecture where we went outside in our car park and did sensory games that you can do with children. So being able to put what we learn into practice and see how it actually works with children was really great for me.
Brilliant.
For me, I know it said in the video, I just love like how much of a community you have at Norland, which you maybe don't get with other universities to the same extent. Like everyone knows everyone, and you don't feel isolated at all. I know I was really surprised as to how quickly I settled in, because all the second years and third years and staff are so welcoming. Such
fantastic.
I really loved the cooking sessions and placement. I think I'm a bit between the two, because with the cooking, I think you get kind of like lost in it, and whilst you're making your food, you've got some music playing. Mostly we've requested ABBA quite a bit, so we've got turns into a bit of a karaoke choice. So it turns into a bit of a karaoke little cooking session. And I'm going to sound like a typical student, but I do love that we get to bring the food home, and it saves me a bit of money there. But also placements, just you form attachments with the children, and you get to learn about their personalities and their likes and dislikes, and it's all these little moments that just remind you, like, constantly, if you every time you like got an essay coming or something works just a bit hectic, just I think those little moments really help you, just to remind you and to keep going. And I'm agreeing with both Lucy and Maria that settling in, it can be hard for some people. I think a bit tricky, but I joined like the choir, and I love that really just like it helped me a lot. And I think it's always just important to like stay active and just keep going, because it gets easier every time you get back. And even I think we have a few more international students, and in that sense I think always know that you can talk to previous international students as well, just for a little tips. But it gets easier each time you come back. So, and everyone at the Norland staff is so supportive. So true to the video that you will be recognised if something's wrong, even in your first year. I know that, yeah, I just always feel like I can go to any lecturer if I have any problem, which is lovely.
Brilliant.
Just as an extension to what Lucy just said, the support is insane. You have a personal tutor. As an international student, you have Claire Hutton, who's the international student manager as well. So there's always behind every student, there's a whole team that wants to support and help and answer any question you have. Any feedback you want to give, Norland always wants to hear about it. So that is really standoutish for Norland from any other institution I've ever studied at. So that's really cool.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you very much. I don't want to ask anything else. I think we've kind of covered everything. I want to say a huge thank you to everybody. So I'm going to just whiz through the final slide. And this is just some important dates. So for your diary, as Marie mentioned, we will be having Claire. She'll be our international student manager. That our admissions and accommodation Q&A. We did one last year, and obviously we're updating it. So please do join us if you're interested in applying, or you want to find out a bit more about the application process, or you want to talk to admissions on a one-to-one basis, you're more than welcome to join us for that session. We won't have a Q&A as we normally do with Unwrapped tonight, because we've had a fantastic taster session. But if you do have questions following this, you're more than welcome to email our admissions department or the inquiries team as well. We also have our open day coming up on Saturday, the 8th of October. Bookings for all for the open day has gone live, so you're more than welcome to book onto that as well. It'd be really good to see as many of you as we can. You know, from a physical perspective, it's great that you can talk to staff and students and really get a feel for Norland and obviously what it's like to be a student. We've also got a virtual event as well, so if you can't make it onto campus, there is opportunity to join us for our virtual event. And just to give you some ideas of the next Norland Unwrapped, I know we've had a question about when the next Unwrapped sessions will be coming up. Dates for that will be confirmed, but we will be touching on student support. I think obviously, as the students have mentioned, student support is very key to Norland, how we can support our students getting them through their degree and their diploma, etc. And also life as a Norland student. I think it's really important we hear from you guys, you know, what it's really like to be a Norland student. So that will take part towards the end of the year, so please do keep a lookout for that. As I said, everything is available on our website. The recording for this will go live afterwards, so please do, you know, if you had a chance to look at it, please have a look at that. And we've also got our mailing list, so I do recommend signing up to our mailing list because it does give you some really important key dates, really great information about what's happening at Norland, and there's case studies, so please do sign up for our mailing list. You also get first look at all the things that are coming out as well, so do sign up for that. And that's it really. I just want to say a huge thank you to Lucy Krebs, who's a bit of a superstar, I have to say. Thank you, Lucy.
Wow.
And Lucy and Marie and Lucy, and thank you so much for giving up your time. I hope you really enjoyed the session. I certainly did. So thank you so much for that. Have a lovely evening, a fantastic bank holiday, everybody. Stay safe, and we will see you at the next Norland Unwrapped. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.